211 is really 911 light. If you've got a real problem, but it's not an emergency, 211 is probably worth dialing. It's a national, non-emergency health and social service number. It's available in almost all of America. Welcome to Insights. I'm Dick Goldberg, and today we're going to learn how 211 can be of help to you or people you care about. With me are Burlie Williams. She's the director of 211 and volunteer services at United Way of Dane County. She's been involved for 10 years with local and state 211 services, as well as the national movement to 211. Also with us is her boss, Kathy Martinson. Kathy was in this job for 25 years before Burlie took over, and she was the originator of its predecessor, First Call for Help. Both women are deeply involved in many nonprofit boards and steeped in the world of nonprofits and volunteerism. Thanks very much for joining us. I'd like to begin by to understand 211. What is 211 not appropriate for? What kind of calls?
This is Burlie, and those the calls that are not appropriate are calls that you would be making to a 411. So, what's the phone number for Chili's or Walmart or Walgreens? Now, we would give you a free 411 number that you could call to get that information, but we don't have that information.
There is a free 411 number?
Yes,
I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
How does that work?
Well, you call and you listen to a lot of advertisements.
Oh, that's it. I see. That's how they support.
Question. Yes.
Okay, well, that's good to know. How about if someone calls and says, well, I want a really good steak or fish fry or whatever. What do you do with that call?
What we would probably do is refer them to the local paper. That's a good resource to be able to find that information.
Okay. Well, to help us better understand, maybe you could lay out what are the most frequent calls you get, what type of problems?
Those would be around sort of the basic needs that you would think of. Food, rent, utilities, healthcare, transportation, clothing, that sort of thing are probably the most common calls that we get. But we also talk a lot about support groups, parenting resources, things like that.
It sounds to me from what you're describing is it's mainly people who are struggling, lower income, who are calling you for help.
Right now it is, and I think that's because the 211 is kind of a best kept secret, so this is why it's great to have an opportunity to tell more people about it. Historically, a lot of referrals are made to 211 through case managers, food pantries, social workers. They tend to know about 211 the best. And so we really do want to get the word out that 211 really is for anybody who's looking for resources and services to help them in their lives or help a loved one and just don't know where to turn.
So if someone's making $125,000 a year, they still can use your services.
Right.
What kind of things could they be calling for? Because the things you mentioned, they probably don't need food and clothing and housing.
One example would be if they have a parent who may live in, it could be in the community they are in or in a different community, an elderly parent who needs some services, and they just don't know where to begin to look for help for them. And so by calling 211, we can help them find the resources in the community where their mom or dad live that can then provide those services. So even though they might be able to pay for services, they don't know where to begin to access those, or they might be looking for a support group or something else that they just don't know where to begin to find those types of services, so we can help them.
So if mom lives in New York City and you're here in Dane County and they call you saying, my mom's in New York City and I just don't know where to get resources for her, can you help her?
We can. We would be able to, because if they're calling whatever community they are in and they dial 211, they're going to get somebody in that local community. So we would then put them directly in touch with the 211 where their mom lives, so that they could find the resources in that community.
So you wouldn't call 211 in New York and then say hold on and then come back and give.
No, we'd want to put them directly in touch, because that way they can talk more in detail about what the needs are, and the 211 might have other ideas of things that could be helpful.
Okay. So you get someone who calls and they say to you, I'm so lonely. What do you do?
Well, we would talk to them and just try to figure out maybe what sort of support that they could use. So it could be that they're lonely because of a particular situation. Say maybe they just went through a divorce, maybe they are a single mom, maybe they are an older adult. So it just depending on what their situation is, we would try to help them find some sort of resource that might be able to help out, whether it is a senior center that you could go to and play bingo, or it could be, say, a parenting hotline that a mom could call just to talk with another parent.
What about a church or temple if they're lonely? Would that even be on your radar screen? Maybe religion could help you. Tough one,
Yeah,
huh?
well, I mean, sure, but we would, in talking with that person, it would be depending on what they would kind of self-identify themselves as looking for. It would be if someone mentioned that, say they just moved here and they had a strong, community of the church that they belong to there, then we would go that way. But it depends on how that person identifies as what sort of things that might help when we're talking to them.
And we do ask if they have other, it would be appropriate to say, do you have any family or friends here, or do you belong to a faith community? Sometimes people don't always think, that could, they think about it in one context, and they don't think, I might be able to go there for some other resources as well, or, gee, there is somebody there maybe I could call. So sometimes we do talk about some of their own personal network, and are there any resources there that could be of help to them as well.
And if they call and say, I'm fighting with my wife all the time, and I don't know who to turn to, but I'm getting so tired of this constant conflict, and I saw this 211 thing. What should I do? What would you say?
Well, we would talk to this person and try to help with them figure out what sort of thing might be able to help. There are, like I said, a lot of different support groups around that. Maybe it's maybe it is a father's support group. Maybe it is a support group for folks that are having problems with their partners. There's alternatives to aggression. So just depending on how that conversation goes, we would just do the best that we could to try to find a resource that might be able to help.
Well, what about marriage counselors? Why wouldn't you refer them to a marriage counselor?
Well, we might, depending on if that's what it seems like that he would be interested in.
And do you know who the best marriage counselors are?
We have information on different counseling and those sorts of resources, but we don't necessarily have all the marriage counselors listed. That would just be impossible to be able to keep up to date. So, but we would be able to refer and brainstorm with this person to try to.
Well, what I wonder is, can you tell this person who is the best marriage counselor and who you shouldn't see and who you should see?
We don't make those sorts of recommendations. What we do instead is try to find what resources there are that could help, and we try to give everybody, if possible, maybe 3 different choices to that they can think about which one is the best option for them.
And we're really referring to organizations, so it might be something like a family services or another organization that part of their service is counseling services, but we don't recommend for-profit individual counselors, doctors, that sorts of things. So it's more an organization that provides more, again, in that health and social service arena is what we're listing in the database.
How different is 211 in different cities? Is it a very different organization in Los Angeles than in Topeka?
Well, to be a 211, you need to be accredited from a national organization. And, part of that accreditation is ensuring that we all are at a certain standard or above, that we provide the same type of service so that no matter where you are, if you call 211, you're going to get the help that you received in your own community before you move to this other community, we'll say. However, we're all a little bit different, and so we're all, each 211 is a local entity, but we work together to make sure that everybody gets the same level of service. But it's going to be different depending on who you call, just like a person's personality is a little bit different.
Sure. Are they all volunteers answering the phone?
No, it isn't. There is many 211s like our local 211 here that do use volunteers, but not every single 211 does.
Some are just all professional people?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Wow. How do the volunteers particularly know all this stuff? How can they, I mean, it sounds like infinity to know everything about everything.
Well, luckily, we don't have to know everything. We have a great resource database that we can do the searching to try to find those resources. We do have a very intensive training with these volunteers, but even before that, when we are meeting with somebody who's interested in volunteering with us, we interview them and really try to get at if it's going to be a good fit, what sort of training that they need, what sort of support they might need, and really try to figure out what we need to provide for them so that they can be successful for themselves and for us.
Do you screen for compassion?
Yes, we do.
How do you know it when you see it?
Well, we do the best that we can. I can't always say it's perfect, but we do ask some pretty hard questions during the interview to try to get at how somebody would deal with a situation. So we would give a particular, what would you do if somebody called and they were, really angry with you from the very beginning? How would you handle that call? Those sorts of questions to try to get at, if this would be a good fit or not. And we do that with our staffing too. That's just part of the interviews, is to try to figure out if it's a good fit.
It makes me wonder, when people call, are they ever just looking for conversation, or are they always looking for information?
Sometimes they're looking for somebody to talk to. I mean, they could be lonely. They could just, they need, that's what they're looking for, somebody to have a conversation with. And we will spend time talking with people. But again, the goal is that if they're calling and looking for something, we want to help them find a resource in the community versus a warm line, as they're called, to call and chat. So, we do try and spend as much time as the person needs, but the end goal is that, what can we do to help you? What are you looking for? What resources are in the community? What can we be doing to help you, in your life? And by talking with somebody live, we're able to do that and peel away a little bit at what their situation is, because even though they think they're calling just to chat, there probably is something that they're looking for. And so can we help them find that to help them with their situation?
Which makes me wonder, what's the average length of your call?
Average length is about 3 minutes.
Wow. So that's certainly not hand-holding. That's information.
Yeah, so that's average.
Yeah.
So that means that, some of our calls are 10 to 15 minutes, and some are shorter. Some are folks that say just want the phone number for a particular organization that they've talked to us about before. So they just forgot to write down the number, and we can give that to them. So that kind of makes the average at about 3.
How many hours are you open a day?
We are open 24 hours a day. Every 211 across the nation is open 24 hours a day. You need to in order to be a 211.
Why do you need people there at 3 in the morning if this is not an emergency line?
Well, people, depending on the situation, it could be that that's when somebody gets off work. People work different shifts. It also could be maybe, if someone's needing a support group, maybe they're reaching out for the first time because of alcohol or a drug problem, or maybe, it could be that's when they get the courage to call. So
Okay.
It's important that we're open 24 hours a day so that we can help people when they are asking for that help.
I'm wondering what your most challenging types of calls are.
So I would say most challenging is when somebody calls in and they have, an issue that I can find some resource for them, but unfortunately they're not quite at a place that they can, accept the help. So there are situations where, somebody will call and say we're talking about, rent resources. And as I'm going through the different kinds of rent resources, this person might be saying, no, they don't want to help me, or I called them last year and they were really mean, or, no, they only serve people with blue shirts, or whatever.
Why are they doing that?
Well, because they're having trouble, because they're upset, they're having a crisis in their life, and they can't see how they're going to be able to get the help that they need. So they're just not ready to be able to take the next step.
They're what you call in the therapy business the yeah but clients.
Yeah,
but that won't work. Yeah, but
exactly.
I wonder why they really are calling then. I mean, what are they hoping to get out of the call?
Well, maybe I don't know. Maybe they're looking for a little bit of emotional support.
Yes.
But really, what I try to take away from those calls is that, if I am able to stay professional and kind, and if I listen to what they're saying and respond appropriately, that when they are able to make that next step, when they feel the courage to be able to move forward, then they'll call us back because they remembered it being as pleasant as possible, hopefully, when they were talking with me.
How many calls a day do you get?
We average probably around 300. It depends upon the time of year. There are certain times of year, say in the winter time, where we have more calls around seasonal resources, we'll say. When school's starting up, it could be around Thanksgiving. But, and then it also, say if there's a disaster, if there's, a flooding that happens, and 211s all over deal with different types of disaster, depending on what's going on. We all have relationships with our local emergency management departments to be able to help out, so that if somebody needs some help or wants some information during a disaster, then they can call 211 and we can hopefully help them find the resource to help out, whether that be sandbags where they can go to get cool on a really hot day.
Well, wouldn't you think the Red Cross would be the place people would call with disasters? That's what they're known for.
Sure, and we have agreements with Red Cross as well. So there are situations in which we refer people to the Red Cross. Say if somebody experienced a tornado and they need to find a place for housing, temporary housing, then we would refer them to the Red Cross. But not everybody is having, say, an emergency at that time. Sometimes folks have heard about something going on in their community and they just want to be prepared. So we can hopefully help with those sorts of questions, so that 911, so that Red Cross, so that emergency management can focus on the folks that really need the help or experiencing an emergency, and we can help the other folks.
You ever get people who are thinking of suicide?
Yes, we do. Though we're not a crisis line, there are folks that are repeat callers, and so they feel comfortable calling us. And so when we get a suicide call, what we try to do is figure out where they are, if they're safe, and then hopefully be able to help them get to a place where we can move them on to the suicide hotline, to the the person that knows the best. But we're all trained on how to best handle those calls. So in case somebody says, no, I don't want to talk to the suicide hotline, I just want to talk to you. Okay, let's just spend the time together, and so that we're all as comfortable as we can be, of course, and work with that person and help them feel comfortable.
What do you do if they keep calling every day to talk to you?
We try to figure out why.
Ultimately, you want to move them to some other resources, right?
Right. However, 211 is confidential. We don't keep track of who you are when you call in. So you can call us every day, actually, and that would be fine. Now, if you were calling and it, if you were calling and a suicide caller, we would try to figure out how to help you the best way, because obviously when you called yesterday, we didn't give you the answer you were looking for, so we would try to work with that person and find them the right answer.
I'm being nosy, I guess that's my job. But since you don't keep records, how do you know you get repeat callers?
Because they'll say that they are.
Ah.
We ask.
You don't like go, I remember this is George, he's been calling all the time. You don't kind of sense the operators don't know that?
No, we don't want that. We want folks to feel comfortable calling us whenever they want to.
Okay.
As often as they want.
Well, if I were you, I'd be a little frustrated by that because you, like Kathy, you've said you want to get them information, move them on to other resources. If they're calling and using you as a person just to talk to, isn't that contrary to your mission?
Well, again, it's people are reaching out and calling, so there are different types of calls that can be frustrating to different people, and that's one thing we all need to do is just kind of put our own personal emotions and biases and stuff in check when people are calling. I think it's frustrating just that, and we want to help people help themselves. We want them to find the resources, but to me, I feel like if they're reaching out to call, there's something in there that they do want some help. I mean, even though it might sound like they're calling just to chat, there's somewhere in there that next time that could be the time that they're ready to do something. So we want them. The frustrating part might be we really want you to be ready to take that next step. And so how can we? Will I be the right person, or will this be the right time that it's going to click for them to want to take that next step?
I would also say that people have different needs. Their needs change. So if they called us, last week because of, say, needing a support group for themselves for something, maybe they talked to their neighbor and found out that they have a recent diagnosis, so they're calling us back to find out if we have any help for their neighbor.
Oh, okay. Now, your bulk of your population is people who are kind of in the poverty or really struggling economically. And you mentioned food and shelter. Are those the two most frequent things people call about, people who are struggling financially and they're calling about food and shelter, or is it psychological issues as well?
I would say it is the most common calls are around those basic needs.
Food, shelter.
Utilities, clothing, yes,
And do you feel like you got that one down, that you can usually help people who are homeless with something?
It depends upon the community, honestly, where they are, what their situation is, their comfort level in, say, going to a shelter. So it all depends upon their situation and the community that they're in, as what sort of resources there are for them. Okay. So it really depends on if there's a resource or not.
Well, let's say in your community, do you find it frustrating when people that you can't help more and give more resources to people when they're struggling and living on the streets?
It's always difficult if somebody if there isn't an exact fit, or what they're asking for really doesn't exist, and sometimes it doesn't. I mean, if somebody says, "I want $1,000 because I want to go see my family across the country," I mean, there are some things that just don't exist, and so that's hard. But again, sometimes they may not know that there's something else that could help them in a different way. That would be good, and maybe it's freeing up some resources. And that was kind of an extreme example, but somebody may need a lot of help with paying for rent or something. There may not be that kind of money available, but if we can help them get food at a food pantry, and they can get a food pantry, maybe every day, that's going to free up money they would have spent on food to go towards rent or utilities, where there might not be a pot of money available there. So sometimes it's helping them be kind of creative, and they might say, "Oh, I didn't know I could do that, or I could get food that often, or I've never been to a food pantry, I'm not comfortable." Again, it's some of those people that have never had to ask for help before and are calling and saying, "I'm not sure what to do, I've never been in this situation." So reassuring them that it's okay. All kinds of people go to food pantries, and hopefully it's a temporary situation, helping them take that step to be comfortable and saying, and then here's how that could help you in another way. So sometimes what they present as what the situation is, there may not be that exact help, but by talking with somebody, we can say, "Oh, but there is this kind of help over here," and then they feel better about that.
Do you ever get calls from people who are drunk?
Yes.
What do you do?
Absolutely.
What do you do?
Well, we try to figure out what they need, really. I mean,
well, don't they need to get some help with their drinking?
Sometimes. Sometimes they're calling to find out a different resource,
Unrelated.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so we work with, what they need.
I would think it would be hard, though, if you see a need you think they need, and they're calling for something else. And you think, what this person really needs is fill in the blank.
Yeah, that's not really what we're all about. I mean, unless someone is a danger to themselves, if we feel that we need to call 911 because of a situation, then yes. But otherwise, we may prod to try to get at maybe the underlying reason of why they're calling, but we don't make that judgment. We're here to help them move forward on what they're comfortable moving forward on.
Are you glad that mainly your mission is serving the disadvantaged, or would you rather see your mission or your audience widen to the middle class and upper middle class and upper class as well, calling for help?
I mean, I'm glad we're there for folks who don't have a lot of means to pay for services, or are at a point where they just may not have the personal support, to help them in a situation. So I'm really glad we're there for those folks. I also really want everybody, I think every one of us at some point is going to need 211. And so I'm glad we're there for everybody, and I wish more people, I want more people to know about us. Because if you're in a tough situation, it doesn't matter how much money you have, you need help and you don't know where to turn. And we all, for somebody who needs that kind of support, needs that kind of resource, I just want everybody to know that 211 is there for them, because we all deserve to have those resources. If the resources are in our community, we all deserve to know about them and to be able to access them and for our lives to be better. So I want everybody to know about us and to be able to call us when they need us.
That's great. And if someone's interested in being on the other side of this and being a volunteer, how do they go about it?
They can call 211. Again, not every 211 utilizes volunteers in the same way, but there might be ways of being involved on, helping to update resources. It could be on the phones. It could be serving on a committee or a board to help support 211 in a different way, or helping with marketing. So there's a lot of different ways in which volunteers can be involved. It just depends on the community if it would be directly on the phones or not. But I'd say if you think this is a great service and you want to see how you can help support 211, give them a call.
Well, I'm really glad you came and shared all this with us and opened this whole world. Most of people in America don't even really know about it. So Kathy and Burlie, thanks for being with us, and I hope you'll join us on the next edition of Insights. And remember, you can find all our podcasts at dickgoldbergradio.com or search for Dick Goldberg at iTunes or YouTube.